James Gunn recently kicked the beehive and unleashed a swarm after making some comments that said the important part of a shared universe is that it's not really a shared universe, but that it is. Look, we're gonna go over everything he said right after the intro, so let's get to that. Okay, so I'm gonna take what James Gunn said, the entire paragraph, I'm going to put it up on screen, and then we're going to dissect it one by one so we can make sense of what he's saying. So first up, he said, and I quote, "If you think of anything as investing time and effort, no matter what shared universe, you definitely shouldn't be. Every story should be enjoyed and worth partaking in on itself, without the attachment to an outside world. If it feels like homework, screw it. Shared universes should add fun to the individual stories, not the other way around. The individual stories and characters are much more important to me than the connections between them." End quote. Okay, so let's start here. So he was responding to a person that said, how much time do I need to invest into this essentially? And if I'm invested into these characters like Peacemaker, for example, and stuff, do I not need to be invested now because different story, different character, reboot, whatever? And he said that doesn't matter, essentially. And what he said here in the beginning is you shouldn't really kind of go into these projects with that mindset, because then you're going to miss some of the stuff that's important about them, right? That it's new tales. They're standing alone. So, okay, so it's still a bit confusing how he's approaching this, but I'm going to clear it up in this next bit. So he says, every story should be enjoyed and worth partaking in, all by itself, which I agree. If we go back to Guardians of the Galaxy, right? That's a standalone film, but it's set in the MCU. Also, a film like Incredible Hulk, or Thor 1, or the first Captain America, right? But then, as they continue to go on, they start to interconnect more. Captain America, the Winter Soldier. That is a mini Avengers film. Civil War, same thing. So I see why some people are saying, well, he's kind of wrong here and kind of right. I'm kind of in the middle on this one. I think some examples that I just gave are great, but some are pretty terrible and straight up go against what he's saying here, right? Like, how do you do the Avengers, for example, if those films don't depend on anything else and everything else that's happened, right? You can watch Endgame, but if you've seen everything, it's way better than if you haven't. So that's what a lot of people are saying, and some people are saying, well, the Avengers Endgame can be enjoyed by itself. It can, but doesn't the rest of the universe add context to it? And isn't the main criticism we're getting today about Phase 4 is that nothing is connecting and seems important? See what I mean? So we're kind of getting a little bit of a double standard depending on who you talk to and who's saying what. He then goes on and says, shared universes should add fun to the individual stories, not the other way around. Again, MCU to a degree both ways, because the strength of something like Avengers Infinity War helped Ant-Man and the Wasp, because it was bridged in between, it filled in some of the gaps, and it set up why Ant-Man and the Quantum Realm were so important for the final film. Like, it's a important piece of the puzzle. But also, what he's saying here is like, well, if it feels like homework, screw it. Well, I kind of agree, but didn't the people complain about this as well? First, people wanted the MCU to make the shows important. Daredevil needs to be important. And then they started doing it with TV shows. And people are pissed, being like, but why do I have to watch WandaVision to understand Doctor Strange? Why do I have to watch this to understand that? So we're kind of going back and forth, right? But again, people will flip their argument depending on which side of the fan base they're on. So I think we're getting a bit of that from the fan bases as well. And the final part he says is, the individual stories and characters are much more important to me than the connections between them. And while I understand that, don't you still need connections? And shouldn't they be important? Like, I understand he's trying to, with the way I look at this, he's also trying to take away some of the blowback that the DCU is getting. Oh, we're keeping John Cena as Peacemaker, and we're doing season 2. Okay, but doesn't it have connections to the DCEU? Well, don't worry about the connections. That's not important. What's important to me is not the connection, it's the individual story and character. So to me, this feels like a prep for that, right? When he's asked about that. That's just the way I look at it. I've seen some other people kind of land on that as well. What I'm trying to tell you here is that he's trying to build a universe, and whatever he says, you can look at it both ways, as I just did. So ultimately, we're not going to know how this shakes out till we see it all for ourselves, but this is still not a giant vote of confidence for me. Then why are they building a shared universe if a shared universe isn't that important? Mixed messages is what I'm getting.